time to come listen to us. This is an interesting one for me, and people sometimes talk to us about how it is that we feel so comfortable getting up and talking about some of these subjects as if we invented them, and in this case we did. So for us, a unified messaging checklist is a natural kind of outflowing of the fact that we invented unified messaging, or at least released it first. I guess there could have been people who thought about it before we did. But back in 1989, we had the first systems on the market, so early that nobody really was interested in buying them. But what that does give us is the longest time in the market of any vendor dealing with the issues around unified messaging. And that includes a tremendous amount of feedback from customers, years of feedback from some customers. So what we've learned along the way is, as you develop these kind of applications, it's not just the features and functionality. Because it's unified, because it's part of unified communications, the connectivity part is amazingly important, maybe as important as the feature set. But we actually have a checklist that we've developed over the years to talk about what you need to do as you consider looking at obtaining a unified messaging system. There's the obvious things, and then there's some not so obvious things. As I've said, we've been doing this for a long time, and when we talk about unified messaging, we're going to talk about all the key points in terms of buying that product or looking at the process of that product. But even more importantly, we wanted to consider what a successful implementation of that product is. We've been doing this, as I said, a long time, and we've come to learn the kind of things that customers overlook that cause those projects maybe to not go as well as they'd like, and how important the initial processes are, even though people say, well, I'm only interested in this one part right now. The considerations that this platform that you source hopefully will last you another 5 to 7 years, so you need to kind of think outside of just the box of the few things you're looking for today. And from our point of view, we understand that because what we have is a single platform that does everything. And unlike most of our competitors, where they'll sell you everything in a big suite, which consists of 5 or 6 applications tied together, we simply turn on the functionality on our one platform to give you voicemail, call processing, unified messaging, custom business processes, full speech access to all of our applications. It's all integrated for us. And what the integration gives us is a much more successful rate at deploying these and having users use them because they're actually easier to use. And people out there have noticed, and if you go out in the industry and talk to the consultants and the various gurus out there, they will talk to you about what we've done in the field. And various people will just flat out tell you, we've been doing this the longest, we have the best product in these various areas, etc. Gartner actually talks about us as the best of breed product for unified messaging. But that's not all we do. Remember, the integration piece is important as well. And when we talk to our customers about why they bought our product, which we do, we go out and have lots of conversations over the years because that's how we get the really good feedback. Just like we look for feedback on these webinars, we definitely look for feedback from our customers. And when we ask them why they purchased our solution, why they considered us in place of others, these are the main categories that they come back and said, here's where we were more comfortable with what you could do and the history you have doing it than in the other areas. And unified messaging is definitely one of them. And it's an important one. If you look historically, we started a long time ago as a small 4-port voicemail company. Back when the big players initially were getting started in voicemail, like VMX and Octel, it was very hard to compete with them, but they were a little too expensive for the branch offices, the smaller offices. So that's what we focused on. But along the way, we realized that our kind of solution works not only equally well, but probably better in a larger enterprise. So we've moved up scale. This is just those of you that have come to a couple of webinars are probably even tired of seeing this slide. But all of these customers have unique needs that we were able to meet. And some of them were just bought our system because of the architecture, and some just because of the speech interface, and some mostly because of the unified messaging. Everyone had something a little different. But we really are able to deploy our product such that we meet just about every customer's needs. Now, why that's important to you is you're looking at unified messaging, but you have all those other challenges as part of a deployment as well. So hopefully this will just give you an idea that we're going to be comfortable going into whatever your environment is and deploying that solution because we've got that level of experience in all those different types. When we look back at the company history and how we were founded, we were very lucky. We were founded by some people from a data department that left the company and decided to build a multi-application platform, and because they were data people, they created a three-tier architecture. And the three-tier architecture kind of has the core services in the middle with interoperability down below it, connecting to various things, and application stacks sitting on top of it. And that architecture has done us very well over the years. It's how we've been able to become the most flexible product out there in terms of what we can do and how we can deploy our product. And it's also made us the most stable platform out there. When you look at sourcing CXE, there is no platform in the market that's been there even half as long in terms of growing and getting the stable software laid out and ready to go. And that's important because you're looking at a unified messaging or a unified communications purchase. And the sad news about that industry right now is it's still struggling. And this is just an Information Week survey that came out last year, actually. Hasn't really changed much, I don't think. But what it's saying is everyone's interested. Everyone can see the value of these various solutions. You know, tying together what you already have to create more functionality, more productivity. It's a very easy thing to visualize, but to actually get those projects out and installed and in use, it's not so easy. And that's why we look at this checklist to kind of give you an idea of the kind of things you want to look at. If you look at the typical UC project on this survey, even once they've gotten through all the other processes and started to roll it out, less than 10% of their users are actually using it. Part of that is because of the complexity. Even once UC has tied things together, it's not always a seamless process for the users. And that's what we really try and focus on. When you're done, if you've selected our application, we want it to go in well and we want it to be used, because then we get to call you for references, and that works out good for us. And still, and this has probably been roughly the same chart for about 5 years now, the most considered, the most evaluated UC solution right now is still unified messaging. Despite the fact that we rolled it out, I think 1990 or so, it is still not a commonplace solution. And people understand unified messaging, and particularly in this age of mobility, they understand the value of being able to tie these things together, and it just makes it easier on your customers, easier on your employees. But still, people are struggling. And the reason they're struggling is a lot of these customers that look at this have a legacy infrastructure, and a lot of vendors will tell them, in order to get the UC features you're looking for, you need to do a rip and replace and take out all of that infrastructure and replace it with a new voice over IP infrastructure. And that's just not true. The truth is, the solutions we offer work on the newest voice over IP system and the oldest legacy PBX identically. The piece that is the telephony piece is just not that hard to deal with in UC. But people trying to sell the suite solution, and trying to sell you everything, they really want to get you to take out as much as they can. For us, we look at unified messaging basically and say, you know, the concept of unified messaging is simple. Let's take all our message types and deliver them to a user in whatever client they find handy, depending on where they are in their day. There is no perfect unified messaging client because your situations change. When I'm off this webinar, I will go into my email and see what came in during the webinar, and I will see my voice, fax, and email messages. And that's very handy, very easy. I'll do that common triage process to see what's important, and the fact that everything's mixed in there makes it much easier on me. When I leave at the end of the day to drive home, I will get unified messaging through my Bluetooth speakerphone in my car, where I can get to my email messages, my voice messages, my fax messages to a lesser degree, and handle them. And probably when I'm sitting down at dinner, I'll be doing that thing we all do that we probably shouldn't from a social point of view, which is I'll be monitoring everything in my email client on my mobile device. So unified messaging, delivering everything to the proper interface, is where our focus is. And because we're a single solution, because everything we do literally comes on a single platform, it's all integrated automatically. Users don't have to know about, go to this client for that and this other client for that. It's all going to be in a single place for them. And we offer, of course, the full range, access via mobile device, email client, web browser, voicemail. We do text-to-speech, speech-to-text, third-party transcription, so you can have your emails transcribed and put into your message. All of that is available. And we've been doing this for a long time, and we've been doing it for a broad range of connectivity. One of the advantages we have, we're the only large player in this market that we're not owned by a company that does something else for their main revenue stream. So we're not owned by a switch vendor or a network switch vendor or anything else. So we focus on this one piece of functionality, and our goal is to deliver it across the entire spectrum of enterprise applications that we're likely to find out there. So we've been doing unified messaging for years with the standard, for years it was only group-wise Exchange or Notes. We do integrations to all of those. In the last few years, of course, with the cloud, we've seen Office 365, which is an offshoot of Exchange, become popular, and certainly Google Apps and Gmail has become popular. And for us, because of that connectivity layer I referenced earlier, it's just a matter of connecting to this other system. All the functionality, all the application pieces remain unchanged. And indeed, our system, a single CXE, could connect to every one of these email systems that I'm showing on the screen at once. So if you end up buying companies over the next year and you're mostly on Exchange, but two of them are still on Notes and one of them has already moved Office 365 and half the users on another are using Gmail, that is not a challenge for us. We simply build connectors out to all of those environments and everything works seamlessly. So that's one of the things you need to think about from a unified messaging acquisition is today you might be on Exchange, but you might know that in the future you're moving. So make sure whatever system you look at is flexible enough to handle whatever you decide to do. When we do look at talking about unified messaging, and we talk to customers about features, I have to say the feature set is become equalized across the many vendors or close to it. So the discussions on features are a fairly small part. The bigger part tends to be architecture. And the reason for that is in the general enterprise market, it's unclear where you should store your email messages from a number of legal points of view. Not from an architecture point of view. It doesn't really matter where the electrons live on the network that much. Today, network connectivity, the size of message stores, all of those, while those were concerns early on, are really not of much interest. But there's a lot of concern over where I put my messages based on the implications with things like discovery and retention. Whether you're a corporation that's covered by Sarbanes-Oxley, or you're in the higher ed market and you're very, very concerned about FERPA, or you're in healthcare and HIPAA is a constant presence behind you, controlling some of the ways you do these things, all of those have implications about where the messages live. And we've learned that from day one, that you need to be able to match what the customer's requirements are. So we're going to talk about a couple of different architectures, and we have all these architectures. One of the probably biggest benefits for us, for you dealing with us and us having been in this market for this long, is we've really learned lessons about the flexibility of unified messaging. So all of these different architectures we're going to talk about can be deployed on a single CXE system, and you can mix it by users by your requirements. So the first one we'll talk about is sort of the high end of unified messaging, where everything's really, really unified. And what that means is we're going to use a single message store. And a single message store means while CX will be connected to the outside world through your phone system and record your voice messages, when it takes those messages, it will immediately move them into the user's email inbox. That voicemail message is now literally an email message with an audio file attachment to it. So everything that works in your environment for email now also includes voicemail. That means things like if you're an Outlook web access user to get to your email from Exchange, you'll now see your voicemail. If you're using cached mode to keep copies of your email messages on your laptop for when you're off net, you'll now have your voice messages. If you're pushing your emails out to your mobile device with Exchange ActiveSync or a BlackBerry Enterprise server, you're now pushing your voicemail messages out. For mobile users, this is the most feature-rich implementation. And it's called server-based because everything's united at a server level on one message store. Now, the downsides here really are you comfortable having your voice messages in your email messages? And that's not a technical concern, that's a legal concern. And we really can't advise you on that. It's different for every industry. We can simply say that if this method is one you would like to use, even if you only want to use it for some of your employees, then we support that. And it's literally a radio button in a subscriber's mailbox that says, where do you want to store their messages? Once they're all stored on a single server, then you're probably going to access them both over the telephone and from the various email clients. So the desktop email client, the browser on your mobile phone, or the email client on your mobile phone, the web browser, all of those now will let you handle the voice messages as well. And we've done all the work for you. In this case, you're looking at a form. We have custom forms for Outlook and a couple of other products where it does things like this is the preview player. So when you're in the preview pane, you can actually see the message and play it with the controls, etc. So all of that is there. So Single Message Store offers the advantage of the most integrated solution that will take the most advantage of your existing email environment. And the only real downside is one of, are you comfortable having the messages there? And what does that mean for you? Other customers say, no, we're not very comfortable with that. And we'll talk about how you can get around that in a second. The offshoot of this one, of course, is, in this case, we were on site, we were on premise, we were connected to your phone system, we took the messages, we moved them to the email server, which in this case was on site somewhere in your network. But the same environment is how we do cloud-based messaging. We do the exact same thing. We take the messages and then we push them out into the cloud, into the message store. So your Gmail inbox, your Office 365 inbox is actually out in the cloud, right? It's not on your premise. That's the beauty of the cloud implementations. But for us, all this is really is a different type of protocol we use, a different connection to get the messages in and out. In both server-based and on-premise and cloud, you have the advantage of having the messages in every email client you have, yet you still can get to them over the telephone, and you can read your email messages over the telephone as well. So this is a full integration for unified messaging. And what clients you use in the cloud vary, of course, by what application you're using. So you could use the Office 365 web client, which is Outlook Web Access. You could use the Gmail mail client. Some people, even though they store their messages in the cloud, use the standard desktop client, because you can do that as well. Our first Gmail implementation, half the people used the Gmail web client, and the other half actually used Outlook, because that's what they were already familiar with. So all of that kind of functionality is inherent in the CX system. Now, if you're not comfortable storing the messages on the email server or in email for whatever disclosure type reasons that you think apply to you, then we also can set up a user for what's called client-based unified messaging. With client-based unified messaging, the messages stay on CX, the email messages stay on the email server, and the email client is configured with two inboxes. One inbox basically shows your email messages, just like it does now, and the second email or inbox would show your voice messages and your fax messages. So you're accessing them from a single client, but they're actually in two separate inboxes because they're actually on two separate message stores. Now, this user can still access them from the email client, play them over the phone, play them over their PC speakers. They can even drag a voicemail from that inbox over into a folder on their other system. And that would actually now move that message onto your Exchange server, which might be a problem as well. So this client-based unified messaging is sort of a half step away. Some messages might end up in folders, but generally the messages stay on the CXE system. And of course, since they're not on the email server, they're not being pushed automatically to your mobile device. They're not available from Outlook Web Access. So what we have is another set of applications. We have our own web client, our own browser, so you can still get your messages remotely. So this is sort of a half-integrated methodology. And when you're doing this is what's called dual message store. Basically, the client you're going to use typically is still your email client. So you typically would go into Outlook and you would go ahead and configure this such that you had an inbox that looked at email and an inbox that looked at voice messages. Still very easy for a user, particularly for users who are typical kind of 8 to 5, work at their desk primarily. They don't travel. They're not very much in need of mobile services. For those people, this is probably one of the easiest ways to deploy unified messaging. Now, both these, you notice, so do have the outside possibility, at least, of ending up with messages in email, and some people, for particularly a class of employee, let's say, are just not comfortable with that. So for those, we offer what we call secure unified messaging. Now, with secure unified messaging, the voice and fax messages stay on the CXE server, and we don't even expose them to an email client. The reason is once they're in an email client, then we can't keep them from being on your email server. So with this, you would access the messages from our web client. Call Express includes a free user web client called Web Phone Manager, and you install that application on one of your web servers, Apache, IIS, whatever you have, anything with PHP. And now that user client lets users configure their mailbox options, change their availability settings, and view their messages. Now, one of the advantages of this method is it's free. The other two require a unified messaging license for each user. This one, since it's all on our software, is free. So we don't charge for users in our licensing scheme. We certainly charge for ports, but you can put as many user mailboxes on a system as you want, and every one of them can be configured for this type of unified messaging. So with this type of unified messaging, I can play the message from my PC speaker, I can play it from my phone, I can reply to other users, but I cannot go file, attachment, save, nor can I forward it out to an email address. So this basically duplicates the security level of a telephone. You know, you can listen to your messages over telephone, you can forward them to other users, but you can't get them out of the system, and that's exactly how this works as well. So this is our free version, very popular version, very easy to deploy, and very secure. And then the last architecture choice here is what's called simple unified messaging, which isn't really so much unified messaging as it is a really great notification system that can also send a copy of the message. So once the administrator enables this for a user, the user can now be set up to receive, whenever they get a new voicemail message, they'll receive an email message that says, you have a new voicemail message from John Tyler. Came in at 4 o'clock today. You now have 7 new messages in your mailbox. And that'll all come to them as an email. And as an option, that email can also include a second copy of the voice message. So now there's a WAV file attachment on that email. I can double-click it. I can play it. I can delete it in email, but the original copy is still on my voice. So this is a dual message store version where I end up with 2 different copies of the message. And some people like that, and some people find that to be confusing. It's just a matter of what options you want to turn on. Once again, there's no charge for this. And also, this delivery piece is very flexible. You don't have to include a copy of the message. In this, you can include a link. If they get it, they can click on the link and go to our Web Phone Manager to play it. You can click a link, and if they're getting it from maybe their BlackBerry phone, they can scroll down, hit that phone number, and automatically log into their mailbox and get the message. So a very powerful notification engine that gives you a little bit in the way of unified messaging functionality. Now, we look at all these architectures, and we kind of wonder if that's not overkill. But the truth is, in discussions with customers, what we're talking about are what everyone calls the 5 C's. Far less than features. And while we don't say architecture in this list, this is really what we're talking about. So from a compliance point of view, your legal people will tell you things about, what they feel about where messages should be and shouldn't be, and if I put them there, how long do I have to keep them? Are they subject for disclosure later, etc. And that changes by your industry, by your corporation, all of that. And from a confidentiality point of view, there are many cases where some users really, you don't want their messages to be an email where they can get out of the system. Healthcare is a perfect example. If most of your messages come from patients, you probably don't want a version of unified messaging where you're having them inside of your email client where you can get them out. So perhaps in that environment, you would give the people that interface with the customers the secure version, whereas the administrative people and the management that travels could use the server base for the full mobility impact. Configuration is the key here. You need to, as you look out, you need to make sure that any system that you look at not only can do exactly what you want today, but is flexible. Because the legal world being what it is, in 6 months, suddenly there could be a ruling in your industry that says, we don't care what you have to archive your voicemail messages. And if you've picked a system that can't put your voice messages into email, you're in a lot of trouble. Or maybe you start out with them in email, and down the road it becomes clear that if they're in the email, they're subject for disclosure, and you want to change that. Make sure whatever system you have is flexible enough for what you want today and any changes you might look at. And then capacity. Where are you storing the messages? How does that impact your network? And we have some really great tools and some features in our product that actually lower the impact on the network as well. And then I certainly don't have to tell you about the last one, which is cost. But keep in mind, cost is something that changes over time? How hard is this to install and to maintain? And are you actually going to roll it out to your users? Is it easy enough to your users that the money you spend for unified messaging, you get your value from because people actually use it? So the total cost of ownership is one of the more complex pieces that you need to spend a little time looking at. And our checklist will help you with some of those pieces as well. Now, all of this stuff that we put out in this webinar, it's very easy for us to sit here and talk about it. It's what we do day in and day out. And we're just, we're lightly dancing across the top of many important topics. What we've done over the years to help us make sure we do a good job of this, but also for customers, is we actually have generated a unified messaging checklist. And the checklist talks about those things that we've referred to here. The flexibility of the system. What kind of architecture does the solution you're looking at provide? What capabilities are there? Can you get your messages from a web client? Is there a secure way to access your messages? All of that is explained in this checklist. And that's one of the deliverables that you'll be able to get just from having attended this webinar. And hopefully with that in mind, you can look at that. And then as you go out and decide to bring some people in and have some unified communications or unified messaging presentations, you can actually kind of refer to the checklist and make sure you're answering all the right questions. The obvious ones you already know. Some of these you might look at and have to think a bit for understanding why it's going to be important. So that sets us ready for the question period.
Our favorite part. Okay, so we do have a few questions. The first one, they're asking, simplified does not require a license, correct?
That is correct. The only things that require a license are server-based, where we store it on the server, and client, when you actually leave it on CX but access it from the email client. The other two types they're no charge.
Okay. Next question. They're wondering where they can receive the checklist. So again, we'll be emailing you a link for the recording of the webinar, as well as the slides to the webinar and the checklist. So you go ahead and look for an email from me, ehatch@avst.com, and I will get all three of those to you. Next question, I'd like to know if AVST is developing access to calendar and contacts with Lotus Notes.
Notes is always a challenge for us. We've been one of the principal Notes partners for unified messaging for years. We have calendar access and contact access for some of our functions for Notes. For example, for unified messaging, we offer full server-based and client-based. We offer the ability for somebody to read their calendar over the phone, the ability to create new appointments over the phone if they have the speech interface in it. All of that is there. Some of the very newest features where we're using the Presence Engine from Microsoft and the calendar from Microsoft to change call routing and greetings, we have not yet deployed in Notes, and we're kind of just trying to wait and see how much interest there is out there. Notes is one of those things where there's still quite a Notes installed base out there, but it's not a very active base. They don't, at least with us, they don't seem to be, changing a lot of things, and as a result, we're not sure how much of it we can sell. So if you're a Notes customer, you should maybe get in touch with one of our salespeople and have a conversation. We certainly know how to do that. We're extremely competent in the Notes world because of our experience with unified messaging. It's just a matter of us being sure there's a strong enough market out there to justify it.
Okay, next question. Is it correct to say with single store it's still possible to have different folders for voice and email message, but client-based they have to be different?
So you can have separate folders with single store, but keep in mind the telephone interface only reads the inbox. So I can build a rule that says whenever I get a voicemail, move it over to this folder called voicemail. That'll work fine for my desktop clients. When I call in over the phone, I will hear you have no voicemail, because all we're pointing to is the inbox. And on the other side, on client base, yes, you have to have two folders. And in that particular case, we're reading both the email folder and the voicemail folder.
Okay. Next question. What phone systems are used most with your solutions?
And the great thing about being the independent company that we are is we work with every phone system out there. So if you want to know, it's 250 published integrations plus another 100 that we know how to make work if we have to. If you want to know, percentage-wise, what do we deploy on? Just go out to the internet and ask, give me the deployment percentages for phone systems. And whatever's number one, that's probably what we're number one connecting to. And the reason is we connect equally as well to older systems and newer systems, voice over IP integrations, all of that. So for us, it's never a let's target this phone system based kind of thing. It's let's walk in the door and ask the customer what they have, go to the whiteboard and show how we work in their environment.
Okay, and the last question, they're wondering if a message is deleted, are all instances of that message deleted simultaneously, or does the user have to delete in each individual message store?
So that one varies a little bit by what you're doing. Let me say at the very highest level, the only time there are two copies of the message is when we use simple UM and manually send another one via email. So every other application we have, when you delete it from any other from one client, it's gone from all clients. So server-based, obviously there's only one copy of the message. It's on the email server. Whatever tool I use to delete it, it's gone. Client-based, it's on CX. And even though I might access it from the email client when I delete it, it's deleting the one on CX, so it's also gone over the telephone. So only with simple UM, when I actually create a second copy of the message and put it in email, will there ever be two messages that require being deleted twice.
Okay, and that looks like those are all the questions. Again, we want to thank everyone for joining us for our webinar. Neil, would you like to add anything before we close?
Just kind of my standard wrap-up, where we certainly appreciate you taking the time to come to these. We think it's a great way for us to get, very we have a lot of information. This is one. I think we have 10 different webinars that we're running in these series that we rotate through. Let us know if they're covering the things you want to see covered. Let us know if you need something different. We would be happy not only to talk to anybody offline about whatever they want to talk about, but to consider the idea of changing the webinars to do specific things. If we hear from you, you will see that reflected.
Thanks, everyone. We hope you have a great day.